This episode, this entire season of Written in Stone, is brought to you by Rab. For more than 40 years, Rab have been crafting rugged, high-performance clothing and equipment that give you absolute protection, comfort, and freedom in the mountains. With roots in the climbing community of Sheffield, UK, they're dedicated climbers themselves, and they channel this expertise and passion into their designs. Nothing fancy or over-engineered, just honest, hard-working gear you'd rather repair than replace. Rab, the mountains are our meeting place. This episode is brought to you by Tension Climbing, where you can use the code WRITTEN15 for 15% off of select items, and by Power Company Climbing, where you can use the code STONE for 20% off of most training plans, products, and books. You know that scene in Forrest Gump where Forrest is running through pivotal moments in history? Well, I once introduced Russ Clune as climbing's Forrest Gump, because since the 1980s, he's been there for many of climbing's most impactful moments. A Gunks local who's traveled widely to climb on every type of rock and every style imaginable, he's a living thread from before sport climbing to now. And if you're ever lucky enough to meet him, he will eagerly regale you with all of these stories. I'm really fortunate to have known Russ for many years and to call him a friend. We sat down at my house outside, so you're going to hear a little rain on the metal roof, dogs, wind, let's just call it atmosphere. You can just imagine yourself sitting at my picnic table with the two of us. In this episode, Russ and I discuss Lynn Hill's arrival on the Gunks climbing scene, working on Vandals and what it meant back then, when Lynn Hill became Lynn Hill, the pros and cons of the yo-yo tactic, and Russ's new book, The Lifer, Rock Climbing Adventures in the Gunks and Beyond. You can find a link to that right there in the show notes. And one more thing. This week, our patrons, the Secret Stoners Club, get a bonus conversation with Russ discussing Jerry Moffat, Wolfgang Gulich, Patrick Edlanger, and more. You can join for free and be entered to win one of 4 free copies of Russ's book, The Lifer, that we'll be giving away soon. All right. Let's get into it. Man, I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you very much, Chris.
The first day I met you was with Lynn, actually. I had met Lynn the night before at Kenny Parker's house at a party. And then you and Lynn came rolling up. I don't even remember where we were climbing, but I remember very distinctly, I was sitting on the ground, getting my shoes on, getting ready to climb, and here comes Lynn Hill and Russ Clune walking up, and I'm like instant fanboy, try to play it cool, and of course you guys are the coolest people on earth, and we just bonded over Todd Skinner and the song I had done and the Dean Potter song I had done. We just bonded over talking about all of this drama in the climbing world. So I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your recent book, The Lifer, and everyone should definitely get it. But I want to talk about Lynn Hill today. When did you first meet Lynn?
The first time I met Lynn is she came to the Gunks to do a magazine article that I believe David Roberts was writing for what was it? Ultra Sport magazine. They were out of Boston, so they needed to. You get some pictures, and they decided the Gunks was the closest place. And Russ Raffa was, I don't know exactly how he got the job, but he became the belayer for Lynn while they took some pictures. And her and I were sitting on a ledge working on some little new route variation. And suddenly Lynn was there with Russ Raffa to do matinee, a kind of a sandbag 10+ boulder problem thing. And that's when I first met her. And then, hi. And she decided to hang out for the summer, for more or less in the Gunks. So all of us were vying for Lynn's affections.
Yeah, I was gonna say, was it like instant you and Russ Raffa?
It wasn't just Russ.
Everybody.
Yeah. And, but she fell into the scene really, really well. I mean, she's and it's Lynn. Lynn was not yet like Lynn Hill. She was just Lynn Lenny, But she didn't. We never treated her like a good woman climber, or she was just good. She was as good as the rest of us, but wasn't really better. But she was as good as the rest of us. So we just climbed a bunch.
She got
with her.
better later.
She got better. If you want, fast forward. When I came back from the 1985 trip to Bardonecchia for the first American competition, and I talked about how heinous it was, how it sucked, how it had nothing to do with climbing. But Lynn was like, so there was money involved?
I could win it all.
I'll take it all. No, she showed a genuine interest. She quizzed me a lot about what the whole thing was about. But before that all happened, long story short, she and Rafa got together, moved in, and then she was just part of the scene in the Gunks for years before she really moved over to France for good, or not for good, but for a stint. So as one of the crew, and it was like Lynn would climb. She would climb with Rafa some, but she would also climb with me and Jeff Gruenberg and her, and she was. She had no prejudices about who it was. It was like, what are you going to do? Oh yeah, I'd like to go do that. Or what are you working on? Oh yeah, I'd like to do that. So she was part of the team, and she was always, she was damn good.
When did it first become clear that she was going to become Lynn Hill?
Lynn Hill. I think that really happened when she moved to France, and she started to started to dominate the comps. Or at least, she would be vying with Catherine Destavel for first place oftentimes. And Lynn, we used to call her the can-do girl. And it was pretty funny because sometimes you'd watch, a boulder problem might have multiple sections on it, and she'd work a couple of sections, and she's like, okay, I'll get this next try. Like, fat fucking chance. Then she does it. Like, What? You just short-circuited like 3 days. How'd you do that?
Yeah.
She'd had just a absolute steel will, and to this day she still does.
Yeah, yeah, and that's actually a thing that I think becomes very clear about her very quickly. Is that she can be really kind of like silly, and she's very, very personable and loves talking to people. But it's not hard to see that there's some seriousness in there, and that she can probably flip to that in a second.
I think that's true. On the drive out here, I was on the phone with Lynn. Amy and I were on the phone for about 45 minutes, and it was almost like a complete ADD experience because there's so many topics that we're getting meshed into. Whoa, let's circle this back to where are we now? But when it comes down to having to do something, that woman is a laser beam.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
I've never been to the Gunks. I know that's sacrilege, practically.
Actually, probably just a good idea these days.
No, I need to come out there. I need to come out and visit you first off. But
always
there's so much history there I need to climb, Can you describe Vandals to me? Like, put it in its setting. What's it like in terms of, does it fit the archetypal Gunks route? Tell me about the route itself.
So Vandals is out of Skytop, and it's really ugly. So it's not a very appealing line. But Jack Molesky and Jeff Gruenberg they decided that, okay, I think there's enough gear to actually make it go. You had this, you're basically about 50 feet, 45 feet off the ground. You had this close to 15-foot roof with a jagged kind of crack through it. Not even really a crack, like a seam. So the thought was like, well, hopefully there's some stuff to work with and there's some gear in that. We'll find out. But to find out, the reason it got called Vandals is because Jack and Jeff started clearing the base of the opening moves from some jagged talus, which even at the time was not considered fair play entirely. It was go as you go. And when I got to them, I didn't know what they were up to. I was just out there hiking. When I got up to them, they had gotten about maybe 8 feet off the ground and had some sky hooks attached to a couple of small edges for protection. But there was going to be a very weird, awkward move just to kind of get up off that first bit. And then Lynn happened to come along and we said, oh, you go for it because we can catch you. Basically we can spot you.
Well, I'll just stand down here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she did. So she did it. And then you quickly get to a ledge, no hands ledge. and you can get some really good gear in there. But then you have about maybe 12, 15 feet of this bulgy white face that is very, couldn't, you know, it's going to be holds on, but you're not sure where exactly, but there's no gear. So Lynn went up a little bit and came down, and a few of us did went up and came down. And finally I went up and I actually got to the base of the roof. And now the gear's below my feet and there's a ledge down there, but I was trying to fish in a piece of gear and I just couldn't get anything to stick. And finally I was off. Fell down. I missed the ledge luckily by kind of slightly sprained my ankle. Then Jeff went up next and he got a couple of nuts in the roof, a couple of small RPs. And we're like, he's like, oh,
you're the lightest, Lynn.
take. And when he took and everything held, and we're like, oh, we're in business. So that was the start of it. And then, of course, the roof ended up being tricky, figuring out how to actually make our way out. But once we figured out how to do these kind of weird underclingy kind of moves, there was a horn about 2/3 of the way out, 3/4 of the way out. And it was actually a good jug. And at that point, there's also a fantastic cam placement. So finally, we had the gear had held, so we knew those moves were going to be fine. But the cam protected the getting over the lip, and the lip is a really weird encounter. There's not a jug or an edge by there. There's like that slanty crack, and it was really hard to figure out how to pull over. We took multiple tries to get over the roof, and of course, we couldn't hang on the rope. We had to, do our thing.
Right. It was still yo-yo.
Total
ethics.
yo-yo. And then eventually, on one of my tries, I can't remember what I did, but I figured out something and I actually got stood up over the lip, which is over the end of the route, because literally you're eye level with the belay ledge. And as I was reaching up to the belay ledge, this flake I had in my hand was a big flake, like the size of a small book, broke off. I went, I was like, no! And then luckily the flake was not really, didn't matter whether it was there or not. And then Jeff did it next try. And each of us ended up leading it. And that was the end of things. Because it was just not just Lynn and myself and Jeff, also her got involved with it as well.
Yeah.
At that time, that was after a couple of years after you had lost his legs. But he was
So this was after.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What were his prosthetics like for that?
Archaic. What he would do is I don't think he used anything really special, but he would really work on his feet. Like he'd make his feet really tiny.
Yeah.
So he could stand, center of gravity would be better. But mostly he was just butt strong back then. Because yeah. And after his accident in 81, he had, January of 81, he really spent 82 kind of staying away from the crowd. He kind of stayed, just kept it super on a DL because he just wanted to see if he could do it. He really wanted to get back into climbing. But by 83, he was cranking. He was climbing well. So, yeah.
Did you all do it in succession?
The first, it was 2 different days. I think it was Jeff and myself and you and Lynn in that order over the course of 2 days. So, and it was everybody went. The thing is, we left the gear. We left the nuts, the hard to place nuts in the roof.
Right.
But you still had to finish the thing. And the reason why we took these days you would just say, oh, Jeff Gruenberg, FA.
Yeah.
But in fact, that was really, that's not a fair assessment in days of yo-yo, especially when everybody making a contribution of something, like get a critical nut in.
Yeah.
Figure out a move. I will say, I know it's archaic. I know I'm an old motherfucker, but one of the things I really did like about that aspect of rock climbing, that yo-yo stupid style when you think about what you're trying to do is push the grade. But, when you got involved with a project or doing a route with it was like, it was a friendly team effort. It was like, it was competitive because you're all trying to do it. But it was like everybody made some contribution almost every time. It was especially it was hard. There was some contribution made by each member of the team.
Yeah, I do like that aspect of it a lot. In fact, when Ray Ellington and I were pushing the trad levels in the red back in the day, we called ourselves Team Yo-Yo. Not because we were yo-yoing things, because we were a little nutty, but also because it was a team. You know, and it was very much like that yo-yo ethic of someone goes up and figures out something, and then the next person has that advantage.
Yes,
and
you're right, because on the outside of it, it's kind of like, so suddenly whoever does the first ascent has a top rope within 3 feet of the anchor.
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
It's like, you know, but it did. I think it did build a camaraderie. I mean, I think one of the reasons I have such strong bonds to people like Lynn and Jeff Gruenberg and memories like with you and Russ Raff over the years is like, we kind of, well, first thing, a lot of times roots were scary, and those kind of burn an image into your brain. And second of all, we we kind of signed a pact to do these things together, and I just think that made for it really made for maybe a deeper friendship. Maybe I'm putting way too much into it, but I do think of those things as being like real crucibles in my life.
Yeah, and I think, Russ, it's like I don't think you can put too much into it. Like it's your thing. So what you put into it is yours. And
Yeah.
I think that's the valuable piece of it, We can't all have that same experience as you.
Oh, you can go ahead and start yo-yoing
I mean,
with your best friends.
Nobody's doing that, Russ.
Yeah, people are a lot smarter these days. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Well, when you're sitting here telling me this story of Vandals, you were like crimping the seams in the picnic table,
Yeah.
and I mean, you were like, you're twinkling in your eyes, and you're like reliving that. That was really cool to watch. So I can see that those moments meant a lot.
Yeah, well, it was super fun, but it really would. And I we were alluding to this before we were talking about stuff. Where you looked at when you were looking at stuff in the '90s. I think one of the great examples you had was like Hubble Action Direct. What came first, and I think that is actually it's kind of important and not important at all.
Exactly.
But I did when my book came out, one of my old friends from the Gunks was very upset with it because he think, well, actually that wasn't the first 513 in the Gunks. My root Intruders was the first 513 in the Gunks. And and my friends Chris Gonzalez and Jim Damon had been working on and Felix Mondugno had been working on this thing same time that we were working on Vandals. And when we finished Vandals, we didn't know what to grade it. We just knew it was harder than anything we had done, and
Right.
certainly harder than Super Crack, which at the time was the hardest route in the Gunks. So we just like kind of suggested, I don't know, 12 plus. I don't know. And again, like I was saying, it would have been only the fourth 513 in the United States, so it was kind of a big deal. First one in the East. It wasn't until '84 when Wolfgang came to the Gunks for a visit, right after I'd been visiting with him in my first real visit with him in Germany when I was coming back through from Czechoslovakia. And he came with a few friends. And of course, if Wolfgang goes to a crag, he's got to do the newest hard route.
Sure.
So he went over to Vandals, and I wasn't there that day he did it, but he said, no. I said, what do you think? He goes, for sure, this is 513. Yeah, for sure. And then, and again, I wasn't there, but he went and did Intruders. And I said, what do you think? He goes, it would be hard if there were any hard moves. And he rated it
That sounds exactly like a Magos quote.
and he rated it 512. And for years, it remained that it was rated 512D and blah, blah, blah. But, modern parlance, some of the kids, well, actually, it's kind of harder than that. It might be 513A.
Yeah.
But I don't know how hard that makes Vandals. Maybe it's by modern standard 13B. Who the fuck knows? I have no idea.
Well, that was sort of like the thesis of season one was that it takes this like teamwork and people pushing each other and friendly rivalries and all of that happening in concert to move these grades forward.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what it sounds like with Intruders and Vandals was like, we're all trying to do the next hardest thing. And I know this group over here is trying to do this hard thing, and we're trying to do this hard thing. And nobody really knows how hard their hard things are. They're just hard.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. It's really true. And especially when you start talking about a grade that, I mean, it's really in
That barely exists.
Yes, it's an infant. It
Yeah.
just had started.
So at the time, you couldn't have even understood what in retrospect would make it significant, being that it's, one of the first 513s on the planet. It's the first 513 in the East, and it's the first female ascent of a 513.
I guess I should start thinking about Lynn as a female sometimes. So just a goddamn good climber. I didn't even think of that. But after Wolfgang confirmed it, that's when I was like, oh shit, that was pretty good. And the other thing too is, the thing with the Gunks, it's not easy to find those routes because oftentimes in the Gunks, as routes get harder, it almost always is that the protection gets worse.
Right,
and we couldn't go sport climbing. And on top of that, the nature of the rock, it's like very bouldery. So before Vandals, we were doing lots of new routes, but they often end up being like, 512 CX, 512 BR. Just no one wants to do those routes. They're just awful. So they get top rope now, but so it's that was just the next route. I will say this about Intruders. It's really a nice route and it protects well. So that was one of the benefits for that. And when Scott did Survival in '85, Scott Franklin did Survival. That was like, he put in 2 pins and things, but he did it ground up. So it was just so hard to find those damn climbs. The Gunks doesn't like it.
Sure.
Unless you're going to put in some bolts. So
which can't happen there.
The bolt war ended pretty quickly. And it wasn't that we didn't try. There were definitely some bolts put in, but then some people get pissed off and chopped them. And the preserve, after it went on for a year, said, forget about it. We're a preserve. That was the end of that.
Yeah, and I think it's fine for some areas to be preserved in that state, I
agree. I'm not going to disagree. I think it's like, I always think it's our gritstone in a way. That's
a good way to look at it.
It's what we have. But it made it hard for progression. Really, it wasn't the progression really. By the time the Gunks started getting some 514s, it was kind of 514, whatever.
Right.
And
really,
it's only like Will Moss's finally freeing the best things in life. When people actually realize what he did, that thing is 14DR, then people might come to visit the Gunks.
Yeah. People should be flocking out there. Well, the few who are into that should be flocking out there.
We were just at Soyuz a few weeks ago, and Babsy and Jacopo were there. And I was like, you guys, you got to come. You got to come check it out. They're like, okay, well, maybe.
Yeah.
It's a small crew that actually want to put themselves in that position for sure.
Totally. Do you remember what month it was that you did Vandals by any chance?
October 29th.
It was October.
October
so the
1983.
Leaves were perfect.
It was getting towards, actually, that was back when, that was getting towards the end of fall.
Yeah.
When, at that time, it was.
When October was actually a good month for climbing.
Exactly. Instead of November.
Yeah.
Exactly. So true. Yep.
That's why I quit doing Rocktoberfest.
Got too hot?
Is because it was 100 degrees every year I was there.
Yeah.
Like I can't come from Lander to here for 100-degree weather.
I'm with you. It's funny because the secret was for a little while, we would start to go down there for Thanksgiving to hang out with Dario and the crew. And nobody would be there. Like everybody left. It was like,
totally.
This is great.
I think I recorded an episode with you on Thanksgiving there.
That's right.
Eons ago.
That's right.
At Dario's house.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're getting off track here. When Lynn went to the Great Debate, she was kind of metaphorically, figuratively, and literally right in the middle. Like they sat her in the middle, and she was sort of straddling the fence of the hang dogging, no hang dogging, rappel bolting, no rappel bolting, the trad versus sport sort of debate. And she got grilled about Vandals because, as you put it, and maybe this is the way she said it, I can totally imagine her saying it, she transgressed.
Exactly. That's the thing. It's the transgression, as I remember it, because I was there, and it was. She hung on the rope for a moment of heel. It's like, okay, that was kind of like maybe, but it was so. It wasn't like she, by today's standards, that was like stopping to brush a hold off that you were just on.
Right.
It wasn't. But following the strict ethic of the time, Yeah, it was a transgression. But by the time of that great debate at the American Alpine Club meeting in 86,
sounds right.
I think it was. No, it wasn't. It wasn't 86. It was. It was 87. It was in because 86 was in Denver. I'm sorry. Because I did a presentation at that. Oh no, it was. You're right. It was 86. Same one. You're right. Denver 86. She had already kind of. Her only bit in my brain of being on that trad side was just that she was from California, but she had already kind of moved on to the idea of we're trying to get into difficulty world here,
right,
and you guys are crazy. And one of the best quotes of that entire debate was Alan Watts when he said to the crowd, "Hey, you guys, 513 really isn't that hard."
Right. And everyone just lose their minds.
And no, I was like fucking right on because it was. Even though still in 1986, okay, we had a 14B, but dude, 513 is still like, you're a team if you're climbing 513,
right? Especially in the U.S.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Maybe only in the U.S.
Well, it was still 513 was still a respectable grade. If you were a team at a time, you've maybe climbed 514A.
Yeah.
And not that many people had yet at that time.
Right.
But Alan's point was just like, it was very true. If you want to actually pursue difficulty, this isn't very difficult because nobody's, your old way of climbing is never going to, you want a slow progression down to a snail going backwards, keep on doing what you're doing. But, the other part of that I think people forget is there was a debate about not just difficulty. What does difficulty mean? Is it just the hardest move? Is it being able to keep your shit together when you're way above gear?
Right.
And so
this is how we end up with shit like E grades.
Well, and unfortunately, the E grade system really is an amazingly good system to tell you a lot about a route.
Yeah, I think it's pretty genius, actually.
And once you decipher what it means, it takes a little while. You have to do enough routes to actually figure it out. But it is true. And I think that's part of what that debate was about. Are we going to pretty much just say goodnight to any idea of boldness and simply pursue technical difficulty? Or are we going to pay homage to the idea that starting from the ground, not knowing what's coming up and playing by the rules of just, traditional climbing, does that still have any place? And I think for a while it didn't. It did go away because we did pursue strictly difficulty for that sake with bolts and well-protected stuff. But it didn't totally go away because there's still a lot of, it's a much smaller crew playing the game, but there's folks who want to do scary, dangerous things at a high level.
Yeah, and I think, I think it's fascinating that the scary, dangerous things also became part of this lore that we have, this history that we revere. Things like the Bakerian, became a part of that side of the lore. The grade is not big by any means,
It feels big when you're on it, I'll tell you that.
I'm sure it does. But that's a grade that a lot of people aim to climb their first day outside,
Yeah.
But they're not going to aim to climb that route.
It wouldn't work out.
First day outside.
It guarantee would not work out.
So I do appreciate the two factions. I do wish there had been maybe more intermingling of the factions and less of the taking a hard stance on the one side.
It took a while for that to happen. I think that's there now.
And I think that's going to happen.
The only real difference now is no one would ever approach a hard, scary route the way we did. Head pointing is a big thing in the Gunks now, as is many places. But that's not, in my brain, that's not traditional climbing. Right, it's a different game.
Right.
It's great.
Yeah, not that it's a bad game,
but
just a different game.
Dude, I mean, the difference between going up and not knowing what's coming up versus having practiced it on a top rope and knowing the gear placements,
totally.
You can do them blindfolded, different game.
Yeah.
But I still think it's cool that people are doing it and not just top roping the things incessantly. It's kind of cool to see it.
Yeah.
And the whippers are amazing.
Oh, I bet. When you said she sort of became Lynn Hill when she went to France, did the things she did after that, like the, first 514 by a woman, Massa Critique, and then the nose and then the nose in a day. Did any of that surprise you?
Well, not really, because as an example, in '94, she had done the nose, and I remember I asked her too. I said, she cried, but I don't know that people understand. She did the nose pretty easily, and
Right.
It was like she didn't spend years working on this thing.
Right.
She went up with Simon Naden. She went up with Brooke. She figured this shit out and pretty much just fucking sent it. And when you think about how fast she did it, that's the impressive part.
It really is.
'94, I'm in France. I've just climbed my first 514A. I'm feeling strong. I'm climbing good. I'm going out with Lynn, and I'm getting crushed.
Yeah.
Because by the time I've done my fifth pitch, she's just fucking warmed up, and she's preparing to do the nose in a day. And she was in a state that I mean, it was unreal how well she was climbing and how strong she was and how she just endure. I mean, I'd be like 5 pitches in. I mean, my day's shot, and then we're not done till she's done like 14 or 15 pitches of like hard 512 up to medium range 513, and it's like,
yeah.
and on-siding them, she or flashing them or having it didn't matter. It's like, what the fuck is going on? So, I mean, and obviously she'd been climbing well, but that was like she was in a different form when she was doing that. It was like some cyborg. It was crazy.
Yeah, I think some people are like, I won't say meant to. I don't know that I believe in destiny in that form necessarily, but some people are really good examples of like role models that should be held up on a pedestal. Not just that are, but should be. And I think Lynn is one of those people.
Oh, I'd agree. She's my hero.
Not only her athletic accomplishments, but just who she is as a person. I saw Lynn. Actually, the first time I keep saying the first time I met Lynn was at Kenny Parker's house, but I had actually met her once before, very briefly, and it was in Vitavu. She was doing her like camp clinic thing in Vitavu at the time, and I was there climbing, and she knew of my music and asked if I would come and perform for her crew.
Really? That's awesome.
Yeah. And when I went to call my friend to say, hey, can you go to my house, get my instrumentals off my computer and email them to me, my house had been ransacked.
Oh, no.
So I ended up having to leave Vitavu. So I didn't get to do it.
Oh, damn
So
it.
I talked to her for like 5 minutes total. And she had already said, hey, I know of your music. Can you come and do this? But then I really met her after I did the song for Todd.
Yeah.
And then at Kenny Parker's house in the New.
Yeah.
But she's just always struck me as like a really genuine person who's embraced her like role model, her like, queen of the sport role. In a really powerful way.
I think that's the thing with Lynn that makes her so human is when she doesn't give a shit about whether you climb 5.0
Right.
or 5.15.
Right.
If you talk to her, she'll look you in the eye. She'll ask you questions about yourself. What'd you do today? I remember I can't remember where it was, but it was some event where she gave a show. And then, people come up and like, introduce themselves. And Lynn she was talking to some guy and she said to this person, like, so, what's your name and what do you do? He goes, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm nobody. And she's like, no, you're not nobody. You're somebody. And, she knows who she is and she wants to know who you are.
Yeah.
If she's going to take the time to converse with you, she's not going to, poo-poo. She's going to talk to you and want to know what you're about. And I think that's one of the things that makes her so human is that she really does converse. She doesn't just give you her story. She wants to know your story.
Yeah, I'm glad she's such a big part of our history. It can go the other way. There can be really shitty pieces of history that we have to figure out how to look over or overlook or not, But in Lynn's case, it's like pure celebration, I think.
I think the only tragic part of Lynn's life in the end is what she did was too early in the sport. If she did what she was doing then today, a lot of her concerns about how to make a living and all the rest of that stuff would have been by the wayside. I remember when she was kind of pissed off at me one time saying, we were talking about Black Diamond and how Black Diamond started, and started out of Chinook equipment going bust, and buying it out, and she said, why didn't you tell me? I would have invested in Black Diamond. And I said, Lynn, at the time I thought Black Diamond had maybe a 10% chance of actually happening. I mean, I put in money into that thing, basically the amount of money I felt I could afford to lose.
Right.
And if you were going to say, I want to go all in and just like roll the dice, I would have said, you're nuts. Yeah, it would have worked out well. But it could have easily not worked out well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but you think about just imagine if the nose wasn't free today, and Lynn went up today and knocked it out the way she did and did it today. It would be like, she would have to be, she'd be like throwing sponsors out the door. Go away. Leave me alone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Lynn, if you're listening, we love you dearly. Russ, I can't thank you enough. I'm so happy that you're sitting here at my house. I need to come and visit you sometime, but it's really been a pleasure all these years. I look forward to seeing you at all of the events and getting to talk to you, whether it's, in a booth in the middle of the night and we've both had too much to drink, or if it's a situation like this. So, man, thank you for your book. Thank you for being you. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Chris. It's always a pleasure, honestly. So, and come visit. We have a room.
All right, I'm coming.
All right, thank you.
1, 2.
Written in Stone is produced by me, Chris Hampton, with help from Riley Rush for Plugtone Audio, a group of the best, most impactful podcasts in the outdoor industry. If you haven't read Russ's book, The Lifer, go get it. Or sign up for free to our Patreon, The Secret Stoners Club, where we'll be giving away 4 copies very shortly. And we have a bonus episode with Russ going out in just a few days. And remember, this show is 100% rooted in the facts, but like Todd Skinner always said, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And if you love what you're hearing, give us those 5 stars and a glowing review, join the Secret Stoners Club, and tell everyone you know, at the crag, at the gym, particularly when crowded around that one extra soft boulder in the new set that everyone wants to do, and together, we can tell the stories of climbing's most important ascents, 1 decade at a time. Secret Stoners. I am tired. Just not sleeping well. My brain didn't work all weekend to get work done. This is usually my time to get work done. So it feels like I'm behind. I don't think I'm actually behind. I'm probably actually ahead, but I probably need to recalibrate in my brain what that actually means. I do a lot of things. You know what I mean? So it's really easy to feel like I'm getting behind. Anyway, the post for the Russ Clune book giveaway, The Lifer, I have 4 copies of it, and that post should be up right now. At least if you're not listening to this in the first hour or so after it posted, it should be up right now in the Patreon. Same rules as last time. Like it if you want to be entered. Comment if you want some extra entries. Comment eloquently if you want me to look favorably upon you and bestow you with even more entries. And of course, before I forget, congrats to the winners of the Alan Watts signed Chain Reaction posters. Elizabeth, G, Misty, Jeremy, and Brian. Congrats to all of you. Those have all been shipped out. You should be getting them sometime in the near future. I posted this in the Patreon, but I want to tell you here as well. If you did not win one, but you would like to get one, Alan does sell them on his website. He didn't tell me this. I went and looked. Alan, you should tell me these things. He does sell them on his website. I have a link right there in the Patreon. Feel free to hit me up. I'll put the link in the show notes of this episode as well. He also sells a bunch of t-shirts there that have some quite cool designs. The same one on the poster. There's a monkey face t-shirt. So if you're interested in supporting Alan, he's given so much to this podcast already. If you're interested in supporting him, please head over there and pick up a tee or one of these posters. Shout out to FX Roy, our newest rock star. And here's a funny thing. FX or EFIX, I'm not exactly sure. And I don't know if I've ever asked you how to pronounce your name. We've talked. I don't know if I've ever asked you that. We get so used to reading names in our own pronunciation that we just forget. I think this is one of the strange things about social media and like getting to know people on social media. And I'm experiencing it quite a bit this season both seasons on Written in Stone, that names I had read for years but never really had to say out loud. I'm going, I don't know if I know how to pronounce this name. And I've gotten a few wrong, especially, German or French names. I've definitely gotten wrong, but I've gotten a few American names wrong too. And it's just an interesting observation of the way we now get to know people very often doesn't include knowing how to pronounce their names. That's a funny thing. And boy, I am up against that right now in the next episode. The next episode, I might add, that is not coming out of my brain into my little typing fingers. I actually made some progress on it this weekend. I got past the sticking point, and that has helped for sure. So I still think we're going to make it on time. Am I dwelling on this? Maybe I'm dwelling on this. I probably need to go to bed. That's what I need to do. So wish me luck in sleeping tonight. And we have another episode coming in a couple of days. You're also getting a bonus episode, conversation with Russ, Friday of this week, talking about lots of the people that we're covering this season and Russ's interactions with them. Some stories from the book, some stories that I hadn't heard in the book at all that just got left out. Russ sort of lets the cat out of the bag that there are thousands of words taken out of the book, a bunch of stories. And I'm like, Russ, we need those stories, man. But you're getting that on Friday. Wednesday, though, you're getting an episode with two of the most genuine people I've ever met. Both absolute crushers. And both Gunks locals or former Gunks locals. I don't know how they prefer to be described. I would call them both legends. They would probably disagree, but I'm going with it because they don't get to tell me what I can do on my podcast. All right, I'm going to bed. I'll see you guys next time.